Imagine you've spent 20, maybe 30 years getting good at what you do. And I don't just mean knowing how to do the job. I mean the other stuff, the things nobody really teaches you. You know when a customer's telling you one thing, but something in the conversation tells you the real problem is somewhere else. You look at a project that seems perfectly fine on paper and think, wait a minute, something's not right here. You've made mistakes. You've fixed mistakes. You've dealt with difficult people, impossible deadlines, bad decisions, and probably a few decisions you're still quite proud of. And after enough years, you develop this instinct. You've seen something like this before. You may not even be able to explain immediately why something feels wrong. You just know you need to look again. And then, AI arrives. It writes in seconds. It researches in minutes. It organizes information, creates images, analyzes documents, drafts presentations, helps build websites. Things that used to take hours can suddenly happen while you're still sitting there looking at the screen. And if you've spent decades learning how to do things yourself, it's hard not to notice that. But lately, I've been wondering if we're asking the wrong question, because I keep hearing, will AI replace us? Can humans compete with AI? Which jobs are safe? And I don't know. I'm not sure those are the most useful questions for people like us. Here's the question I'm much more interested in. What happens when everything you've learned over 20 or 30 years gets access to something this powerful? Because that's a very different conversation. And I think there are 4 things we need to understand about it. First, experience isn't the same as information. This sounds obvious, but I think it's actually the key to the whole thing. AI has access to an extraordinary amount of information. Ask it about construction, teaching, sales, management, cooking, marketing, business, gardening. It can probably tell you something useful about almost anything. So if experience simply meant, I know a lot of information, well, we'd have a problem. Because AI knows a lot of information too. But that's not really what 20 years of doing something gives you. Think about an experienced carpenter. AI can explain how a suspended ceiling works. It can summarize installation instructions. It can make a checklist. It could probably help create a pretty impressive training guide. But put an experienced carpenter on an actual construction site, and something else starts happening. He looks up. Something doesn't line up. He checks the drawing, looks back at the actual site, and thinks, those 2 things aren't going to work together. Maybe he's seen this problem before. Maybe he hasn't. But years of solving real problems have taught him what deserves a second look. He knows when to continue. And sometimes, more importantly, he knows when to stop, to check, to ask, to make sure an expensive mistake isn't about to happen. That's not just information. That's judgment. And judgment comes from seeing what happens when decisions meet reality. A teacher has her own version of this. AI can create a beautiful lesson plan in seconds. Honestly, probably faster than most of us ever could. But an experienced teacher can look at that perfectly organized lesson and say, my students are going to get lost right here. How does she know? Because she's watched it happen. Again and again. She knows that the technically correct explanation isn't always the explanation that actually helps somebody understand. She can see the face of the student who's stopped following, even when that student hasn't said a word. That's experience. It's not simply knowing more facts, it's knowing what matters, when it matters, and what to do when real life refuses to follow the instructions. That's our first piece. Second, experience alone isn't enough now. This is where I don't want us to get too comfortable, because there's another sentence I've heard. I've been doing this for 30 years. I don't need AI. And I understand where that comes from, but I'm not convinced it's wise, because some of the work we used to spend hours doing can already be accelerated. First drafts, research, summarizing a long document, organizing a pile of notes, brainstorming alternatives, routine emails, turning a rough idea into some kind of structure, even basic visual material. Things that used to swallow an afternoon can sometimes be reduced dramatically. And I'm not talking about some prediction of what AI might be able to do in 2030. I'm talking about now. People using AI at work are already reporting that it can free up time for higher value work. And that's the part that interests me. Because suppose you're spending 3 hours on something AI can help you finish in 30 minutes. What happens to the other 2.5 hours? Well, you could just do more work. And I'm not sure that's the exciting answer. Or you could put some of that time back into the parts of your work where your experience actually matters. Talk to the customer, check the quality, think through the decision, solve the unusual problem, teach somebody, improve the idea, do the part that actually needs you. And that's where I think experience and AI start becoming much more interesting together. Because if I'm spending my best hours doing work that doesn't require the best of me, maybe that's exactly where I should let AI help. Third, let AI do the heavy lifting, not the judging. This is probably the most important part for me. I don't think the answer is experience versus AI. And I definitely don't think it's AI instead of experience. I think it's something closer to this: experience x AI. Let AI carry some of the weight, but don't hand over your judgment with it. Go back to our carpenter. Imagine he spent 20 years working on sites. He knows the common mistakes. He knows the shortcuts people shouldn't take. He knows the questions younger workers sometimes don't even realize they should be asking. There's a lot sitting inside that man's head. Now ask him to come home after a full day of physical work, open a blank document, and turn 20 years of practical knowledge into a beautifully structured training resource. He may never do it. And that's not because his knowledge isn't valuable. Writing isn't necessarily his skill. Neither is structuring information, or formatting, or designing, or figuring out how to turn what he knows into something another person can actually use. This is where AI can do some serious heavy lifting. It can ask him questions, organize his answers, group ideas together, take a rough explanation and help make it clearer, help structure a guide, create a checklist, maybe help turn 20 years of knowledge into something a younger tradesperson could actually learn from. But there's one moment in that process that matters enormously. The carpenter looks at what AI produced and says, "That's wrong. That's not how we'd actually do it. You've missed something. This part matters. Keep that. Change this." That moment, that's the value of experience. AI helped with the execution. The human remained responsible for the result. And this isn't just construction. An experienced salesperson can use AI to draft an email, but years of dealing with real customers can tell her, "Don't send that. It sounds terrible." A manager can use AI to summarize 20 pages of information, but experience helps determine which 3 sentences actually matter. A teacher can ask AI for 5 different ways to explain something, but experience helps her choose the one that's most likely to reach the student sitting in front of her. AI can give us options incredibly quickly, but generating an option and recognizing a good option aren't the same skill, and I think that's something experienced people should remember. Finally, start with what you already know. This is probably the part I wish somebody had told me earlier. You don't have to start by asking, "Which 50 AI tools should I learn?" Please don't. You'll probably exhaust yourself before you accomplish anything. You don't even have to start with the tool. Start with you. Ask yourself, what's something I already understand really well? Then ask, what part of doing it takes far too much of my time? Maybe you're a great teacher, but preparing materials takes forever. Maybe you're excellent with customers, but writing follow-up communication drains you. Maybe you know your trade inside out, but you've never known how to organize that knowledge so somebody else could learn from it. Maybe you've run a small business for years and you have systems sitting inside your head that you've never written down. Or maybe your career doesn't look neat at all. Mine certainly doesn't. I've taught, I've worked in sales, I've coached people, I've been in business, I've worked in retail, and now I'm creating online and learning AI. Put all of that on paper and, yeah, it's a bit messy. For a long time, I looked at those pieces and wondered what they actually added up to. And maybe some of you know exactly what that feels like. You've done a lot. You've learned a lot. But you don't necessarily know what to do with all of it now. That's where AI became interesting to me. Not because I want AI to tell me who I am, And definitely not because I think a chatbot understands my life better than I do, but because it can help me do something that's surprisingly difficult to do for ourselves. Step back, look at the pieces, ask questions, find patterns I might have missed, organize scattered thoughts, help take something that's been sitting in my head for years and make it visible. Maybe that becomes a guide, a learning resource, a service, a piece of content, a website, or maybe it simply helps me do the work I'm already doing better. And I think that's a much more useful way to approach AI. So if you're wondering where to begin, don't spend tonight trying to learn AI. Try something smaller. Pick one task you already understand well. Just one. Then ask yourself, where am I spending time doing work that doesn't require the best of my experience? That's where I'd start looking for AI help. Let it organize. Let it draft. Let it summarize. Let it give you options. Let it carry some of the repetitive weight. And then, come back in. Correct it. Question it. Improve it. Throw out what doesn't work. Add what it couldn't know. And own the final result. Because maybe this isn't about experienced adults throwing away everything we've learned and becoming beginners all over again. Maybe it's almost the opposite. For years, many of us had experience, but limited time, limited resources, limited technical ability. Maybe we couldn't hire a designer, or a researcher, or an editor, or someone to help us turn an idea into something real. And now, we suddenly have access to tools that can help carry some of that load. So maybe the question isn't, what is AI going to do to me? Maybe it's, what can I do with everything I already know, now that AI can help me with the heavy lifting? That's the question I want us to explore here. Not AI hype, not predictions about which jobs disappear someday, and definitely not pretending that every shiny new AI tool is going to change our lives. I want to find practical ways people with real experience can use AI to become more capable, to work smarter, to create things that used to feel out of reach, to make what we've learned more useful, and maybe to discover opportunities hiding inside experience we've been taking for granted. AI can bring the speed, it can help with the execution, it can carry some of the load, but you bring the experience, you bring the judgment, you bring the years, so no, you're not starting from zero, not even close, you're not done yet.